So let's get down to business as quickly as possible. Let me tell you the story. I'm here to tell a story about the tremendous contributions that were made by the Jewish mob during for the betterment of the welfare of the Jewish people during, from the 20th century going forward. Specifically, their participation in fighting the American Nazi Party in the 1930s, and the remarkable contribution that they made to help both Haganah and Irgun in the struggle for independence from the British and for the establishment of the State of Israel. So I want you to think, keep this thought in mind as I tell the story. You're going to have a problem, because I have a problem sometimes figuring out who are the patriots and who are the pirates. If you take an Israeli patriot that was born or raised in Palestine, and he in turn was brought to the United States, and he was born and raised here, or he was raised here in the United States, he may very well have turned out to have become a Jewish gangster. By the same token, take a gangster and have him raised in Palestine, he might very well have been a Jewish patriot. So I want you to keep that thought in mind as I tell my story. So let's begin with the formation of the Jewish mob. Where do we begin? So we begin in the ghettos of every major city of the United States. Now, I come from Newark, New Jersey. My father, Alav Shalom, was born in Newark, New Jersey. My father was part of that world, and I'm the last one to tell the story. So, and I'm proud to be able to tell this story, because I have a responsibility to share an important part of history with Jews throughout the entire world, for that matter. So, it begins with gangs. It begins in the neighborhoods and the ghettos. These kids were tough kids, and there was poverty, and there was struggle for money, a struggle to survive, to take care of your parents. It wasn't parents taking care of kids, it was kids taking care of parents, their immigrant parents, and so forth and so forth. In the ghettos, and particularly I can tell you the story in the 3rd Ward of Newark, New Jersey, which was Prince Street Ghetto. So what would happen is, when the pushcart guys were being attacked by the Shkutzim, by the Goyim, by the anti-Semitism, they'd come in and they'd start beating up on the old Jews. So the old Jews would call the local gangsters. All of the kids, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, come, defend us, because you're defending your father, you're defending your uncles, you're defending your brothers, your cousins, and so forth and so forth. We're getting beat up. Well, this is not going to happen. In that generation, the Jews are not going to take it with beating on the head and bowing their head. And just like what happened in 1903 in Kishinev, in Europe at that time with the pogroms and so forth, we had a Jabotinsky that went and said, no, you're not going to do this to us anymore. We're going to have defense. The 20th century, the turn of the 20th century becomes pivotal in terms of that we're no longer be submitting and bowing our heads. We're going to fight back. So these kids fought back. They fought back to protect the Jewish neighborhood. 1920. Well, we all know that 1920 was the passing of the Volstead, the Prohibition, and this was a tremendous opportunity for immigrants. Jews, Italians, Irish, Polish, everybody could benefit from making money where all the opportunities, the doors were closed for all other kinds of possibilities. A lot of our people went into Prohibition. So from those young gangs that were protecting the neighborhoods in the 1910, 1915, so forth, they now evolved into young 20-year-old businessmen of sorts, illegal, of course, Now, in Newark, New Jersey, we had a gentleman there, Sam Reinfeld. Sam Reinfeld was the first bootlegger of Newark, New Jersey. And Sam Reinfeld, of course, Newark was divided between big Italian neighborhood, big Jewish neighborhood. The Italians had their own bosses. His name was Richie the Boot Boiardo. And our boss in Jersey was the name Abner Longy Zwillman. Why the name Longy is because when the Schutzim would come in and beat up on Jews, the pushcart peddlers would say, Rift for the Langer. So from Langer comes the name Yiddish, Longy. He was 6'1", 6'2", handsome, debonair, self-educated. At 20 years of age, he was already a boss. What happens, of course, is in the case of Reinfeld employed him, Longy, and his partner. His partner's name was Joseph Doc Stacher, who later on was exiled to Israel in 1964, 63, 64. He was exiled by Kennedy. Kennedy at that time was the U.S. Attorney General. He worked out a deal but Longy, Zwillman, and Doc Stacher were the bosses of Jersey, and they ran alcohol. And as a matter of fact, Sam Reinfeld employed him, but ultimately Sam Reinfeld had to accept them as partners, and ultimately, eventually, because Longy and Doc had the shooters, they had the gunmen, they had their own Jewish gangsters, so they eventually took over all of alcohol to the point where Abner Longy Zwillman became known as the Al Capone of New Jersey. Longy was a powerful man. Of course, it developed a little bit older, more self-educated and so forth. He financed movies, had a love affair with Jean Harlow, and he financed the Warner Brothers movies and so forth. They became prominent, and he was on the same level with Meyer Lansky. But let me continue with the story as far as Newark, New Jersey was concerned. I will interrupt at this point to say that there was Meyer Lansky met up with Longy Zwillman, and eventually they became very, very close friends. They worked together. They were both of the same world. There was one Jew, Arnold Rothstein. Arnold Rothstein was from a middle-class Jewish family, upper middle class, had money, but he wanted to be an outlaw. And he was more sophisticated. He gave training and teaching and education and sophistication to Meyer Lansky, Lucky Luciano, and so forth and so forth. Continuing. With the end of the Prohibition ended in 1933, but we had a new phenomenon in the United States after the Roaring '20s. It was known as the end of Prohibition, the beginning of anti-Semitism. And if some of the older people here might remember Father Coughlin from Detroit, the anti-Semitism, and Henry Ford, the anti-Semitism. It was a terrible time in the United States as far as Jews were concerned. You had the rise of Nazi philosophy and policy, political movement in Munich. Now, in the 1920s, history begs a question that, I'm not ready to ask that question. Let me just say this, that in the 1930s, in Newark, New Jersey, New York, Minneapolis, Chicago, other places, Boston, you had this rise of terrible anti-Semitism. And with Hitler in Munich, we also had a Nazi comes to the United States by the name of Fritz Kuhn. Now, Fritz Kuhn was the leader of the brown shirt movement of the American Nazi Party in the United States. There was a prize fighter in Newark, New Jersey by the name of Nat Arno, a former prize fighter by the name of, his original name was Abramowitz. So he went to Longy Zwillman because Newark, New Jersey We had a large German population going all the way back to the middle of the 19th century, and we had a large immigration of Germans after World War I. We had on Springfield Avenue in Newark many beer gardens extending into Irvington, Union, Springfield, and so forth. Fritz Kuhn started in New Jersey to bring about to generate anti-Semitism and to spread Nazi philosophy in Newark. Nat Arnold went to Longy, and Longy said, okay, I'm going to bless you. You go ahead and do what's got to be done. And they formed an organization that was called the Minutemen. There's a book written by a dear friend of mine, Warren Grover, called The Nazis in Newark. And it tells the story of the Jews that were called themselves the Minutemen that fought the American Nazi Party in the streets of northern New Jersey. And a lot of those participants in that were, of course, Jewish gangsters, thugs, prize fighters, and just regular workers. So they called themselves the Minutemen in honor of taking the name from the Minutemen that fought in the Revolutionary War, and that you call a club, call a bar, call a saloon, the Nazis are meeting such and such, we're meeting tonight, bring your monkey wrenches, bring your brass knuckles, and we're going to do damage. You bring your stink bombs and so forth. So when the Nazis would meet, the Jews would run in, throw in their stink bombs, throw this, throw that. And as the Nazis came running out, they took the worst beating of their life. This happened time and time again. It's all documented in a wonderful book called The Nazis in Newark, written by Warren Grover. There were many prize fighters. We had many champions. A lot of our Jewish boys that came out of the ghettos went into professional boxing, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands. And at one point, we dominated 1/3 of the professional prize fights of the United States, championships of the United States of America. Now, in conjunction with the question of, in connection with this, I want to tell a real short, funny story. My father, alav shalom, had a very dear friend. His name was Jaime Kugel. Jaime was a referee at Laurel Gardens in Newark, New Jersey, and he was completely, he couldn't be objective. When a Jew was fighting, the Jew got the benefit of the doubt. So one night, and a lot of the fighters in those days would take on other names so that their mothers and fathers wouldn't know that they're fighting. And one night, there's a guy fighting by the name of Greenberg. Jerry, Greenberg gets knocked down. And Jaime Kugel goes, 1, 2, and by 3 he says, schmuck, I'm counting slow so you can get up, you dumb Jew, get up. Looks up at him, he says, I'm not Jewish, I'm Italian. 8, 9, 10, you're out. Well, Jaime Kugel was a member of the Minutemen also. You had these kind of, this was the type of Jew that we all knew and we love, because they love Jews, and that's what it's all about. So we fought the American Nazi Party in the 30s, and we finally defeated them to the point that they ran away. They did have a big meeting at Madison Square Garden. There's a very famous picture. 20,000 of them showed up in uniforms. Some Jew ran up by the name of Greenbaum, ran up and they beat him up. He ran up to the stage to attack Fritz Kuhn. Fritz Kuhn ultimately, who was the leader of the American Nazi Party, got indicted by the American government for embezzlement of his own organization. He got jail time and they deported him. So again, I'm telling a story that was a very important story. But this didn't only happen in Newark, New Jersey. There was a judge by the name of Judge Nathan Perlman, and a very famous Reform judge, a rabbi by the name of Stephen Wise. And they went to they reached out for Meyer Lansky and said, Mr. Lansky, we have a problem. In Yorkville, which was a German enclave in Manhattan, you got these anti-Semites, you got these brown shirts and so forth and so forth. You got to do something about it, all right? But one favor, please. You can beat the shit out of them, but don't kill anybody. So Meyer Lansky formed an organization comparable to the Minutemen. They went up to Yorkville, and they did effectively the job of throwing him out the window and beating him up and blooding him and so forth, to the extent that the Nazis understood that the Jews were not going to be cakewalk you're going to walk over them, you're going to abuse them, and so forth and so forth. I want to tell a nice story because I met a nice gentleman over here. Tony, right? Is your first name Tony or what? Huh? Yes. Your name's Tony. Yeah. So I'm going to tell a nice story. You're Italian. So be proud of the fact that you're Italian. I'm going to tell good stories about the Italians. We like the Italians. According to Rashi, our great interpreter of the Torah, you people are descendants of us. All right? And I like pasta vizul. So now, Meyer Lansky, Charlie Lucky Luciano, he goes to Meyer Lansky and he says to Meyer, Meyer, let me give you some support with regards to beating up those Nazis in Yorkville. And Meyer Lansky says, Charlie Lucky, thank you very, very much for this very kind offer. This is a Jewish problem. Jews will take care of it by themselves. Now I want to tell you a little bit how the mobs, how they amalgamate. Okay, how the formation of the mob. So I told you the story of Prohibition and so forth. Before I forget, I want to tell you the story about Minneapolis. We had a mobster up there by the name of Dave Berman, very famous, went to Vegas casinos. There was a mamzer up there by the name of Pelly, William Pelly. He formed an organization called the Silver Shirts. It was an anti-Semitic organization, talked the worst crap on the face of the earth as far as Jews are concerned. And Dave Berman went into every one of their lodges every time they met with his crew. You had Yiddy Bloom, you had King Khan, you had Sam Taran, Herman Pastor. And they went in there and they kicked the crap out of these people so that Pelly found it uncomfortable to have these lodge meetings and talk anti-Semitism. You had it also in Chicago. There was a very famous prize fighter. Can I see hand recognition right now? Somebody want to tell me that they know Barney Ross? Okay, great. So Barney Ross, we know, was a great Jewish prize fighter, great American hero, a very proud Jew, and a very dear friend of my father's. He, together with a fellow by the name of Rubenstein, fought the Nazis in Chicago with their group. Now, trying to remember the fellow's first name, Jack Rubenstein. Does anybody recognize that name? How about Jack Ruby? Okay, yeah. He was a mobster. But he was a proud Jew, and he fought together with Barney Ross and with other Jews and fought anti-Semites in Chicago. So the formation of the mob comes about as a result of a power struggle amongst the Sicilians. There were two Sicilian bosses. One was known as Joe the Boss Masseria, and the other one was known as Salvatore Maranzano. Now, they were the bosses that originally came from Sicily, from a place called Castellammare. Castellammare was a little place, and you came from there. You had two power bosses at the time, and they fought over power at the time of Prohibition. Now, the Jews, we had our own mob. I'm going to look for name identification right now. How many people here recognize the name Meyer Lansky? Oh, thank God. I got an educated crowd. And how many people here recognize the name Bugsy Siegel? Wonderful. I love talking to educated Jews. And then you had Dutch Schultz. Okay, Dutch Schultz. His actual name was Arthur Flegenheimer. He was a German Jew, son of religious people, but he decided to become Catholic when he died, and we said, okay, go ahead. You can have him. They killed him in Newark, New Jersey in 1935. Maranzano and Masseria fought over the new Turks. The old Italians were called the old mustaches, all right? They came, the old mustaches, Sicily. They had that xenophobic mentality. We don't do business with people that are not from Sicily, not from our village, not from our road, my mother didn't know his mother. And they certainly weren't going to do business with Jews. But there was a very smart guy downtown New York by the name of Charlie Lucky Luciano, all right, Lucania. His real name was Lucania, and he had a brain. And he liked Meyer Lansky because he said, wow, this guy's he's smart and we can make money. And they were introduced together to a fellow by the name of Arnold Rothstein. Rothstein gave sophistication taught him how to dress, how to be nice. You know, don't look like be a celebrity gangster. Look good, put on a jacket, tie, so forth and so forth. So the young Turks amongst the Italians was Anastasia, you had Albert Anastasia, you had Vito Genovese, you want to help me? Frank Costello. Come on, people. I see it. I got an educated crowd here. So, Joe Adonis, all of that young Turks were part of the Lucky Luciano crowd of that mob, and there was a power struggle between Masseria and between Maranzano that fought over the control of Lucky Luciano, because if you control Lucky Luciano, you had real power. So they wanted to have him. Joe Masseria kidnapped Lucky Luciano, made him an offer that he did refuse. And they cut him up, left him for dead. He survived. And then he went and talked to Bugsy Siegel, and he talked to Meyer Lansky. And he says, gentlemen, we're going to form a new organization. But first, we got to get rid of the old-timers. The Italians, together with Bugsy Siegel, he participated in that. They killed Joe Masseria while he was eating in a good Italian restaurant in Coney Island. Italian restaurant. Chulin. They made chulin out of him. They made chulin out of him. And the Jews were hired to go kill Maranzano, Salvatore Maranzano. They dressed up as IRS agents and walked in on Salvatore Maranzano. They didn't recognize who they were. They consisted of one of Dutch Schultz's guys. I think it was Teitelbaum. Another fellow, of course, was Bugsy Siegel again. There was another fellow that I think might have been Louis Rush, but for sure the fourth guy was Sam Red Levine. Now, wonderful man, Sam Red Levine. Rabbi would be very proud to have him here in his Chabad. He always had a kippah on his head, wore tzitzis, all right, kept kosher, observed Shabbat, and would never kill anybody on Shabbat unless it was absolutely necessary. Samantha, am I boring you yet, honey? No, I don't think so. Okay. So now you had the formation of the mob. They made a deal with Meyer Lansky and Bugsy Siegel and Lucky Luciano. It was a very, very strong relationship. Now the Jews, we had our own power, so they respected us for it. And they only respect us when we do have our own power, all right? It's a great story about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Lubavitcher Rebbe one time seen somebody on the street. You know the story, Rabbi. And it was a Jew, and he bowed his head. And when he saw a Gentile coming towards him, he tipped his hat. And the Jew says to him, "Oh, Rebbe, why for me you bow my head, and for him you don't bow your head?" He says, "We never bow our head to anybody but ourselves." Our Jews had the same mentality. It was no longer a question of bowing our heads to anybody. We were now in the process of getting rid of the mentality of Galut. It was not only happening here, all right, but it was happening in Europe. We had somebody by the name of Vladimir Zev Jabotinsky, the great founding father of the revisionist Zionist movement, which is the philosophy, which is the philosophy of Menachem Begin, Ben-Zion Netanyahu, Shamir, and Netanyahu. It's a philosophy that we are proud. We're absolutely proud, and we're not going to bend our heads and bow our heads anymore, and so forth and so forth. Thanks, Rabbi. You have anything better than this? So, in the end of the 30s, the war started. All right, World War II started, and at that time, their war was declared December 7th, December 8th, 1941. Immediately in February 1942, there was a very well-known incident in the port of New York, in the docks of New York. It was the sinking of the Normandy, the SS Normandy. The SS Normandy was a luxury ship that was brought from France, and we were going to use it to make it a ship to be for transport, to bring American troops to fight in Europe. And that ship was sunk mysteriously. To this day. You know, nobody really ever knew what was the reason that it sunk, but there was concern. And it brought about a little bit of paranoia on the part of the United States government. There was a Navy intelligence officer by the name of Charles Heffenden. Charles Heffenden was contacted, reached out for an attorney by the name of Moses Polikoff. Moses Polikoff was the attorney for the mob. He was the attorney for Myron Lansky, for Lucky Luciano. And he reached out for him and he says, could you make a meeting? I want to meet with Myron Lansky. And Lansky agreed to the meeting and met with Charles Heffenden. He says, what is it that you need? He says, we need protection against sabotage in the ports and docks of New York. You got the German U-boats, you got this, you got that, and so forth and so forth. We need the help of the longshoremen. And we're concerned because the longshoremen consist of two ethnic groups, the Italians, who might possibly be sympathetic towards Mussolini, and you got the Irish who are anti-British. So we need the cooperation of the mob because you guys control the longshoremen and so forth. So Myron Lansky says, well, okay, but your guy Dewey, all right, Thomas Dewey, who was at that time prosecutor, you framed Lucky Luciano on a nonsensical, fake, fraud charge of prostitution, and you want to become the governor. You're against organized crime. You took down Lepke. You took down Abe Rellis. You know the story of Abe Rellis. He was in the Hotel Half Moon in Coney Island, and he was going to inform against the mob, and so he was guarded by the police and so forth and so forth. And somehow or another, they found him the next day on the pavement, and so the papers had the next day headlines: the canary can sing, but he can't fly. So Dewey he aspired to be the governor, and so he used the prosecutor's office and taken down Lucky Luciano. He wound up with a 30 to 50-year sentence. They shipped him up to a prison called Dannemora, all the way up in New York State on the border with Canada. You freeze your tuchus off there. You don't have to worry about, global warming up there. So Lansky says to Polikoff, tell Heffenden, good, you bring my man down there, because the only guy that can control the docks, and the only one that they respect, is going to be Charlie Lucky Luciano. Bring him down, bring him to a closer prison, and let's also talk about some kind of a pardon, because you know damn well that was a fraudulent charge that you brought against him. Okay, so they brought him down to Great Meadows, a couple of hours from here, a little bit closer. This way he could get his shrimp marinade. You know what I'm talking about, Rabbi. He could get his osso buco. He could get his pork chops. So, and maybe something else at night as well, Rabbi. Listen, if he's going to cooperate with the American government, give the guy something, for God's sakes. So anyways, Lucky Luciano sends the message. There were two dock bosses. One, the Italian, was Sachs Glanza, and he belonged to Lucky. And the other guy was Eddie McGrath, the Irish boss, and he cooperated as well because he was also part of the whole story. Lucky Luciano, for recognition, they went to Dewey at that time and said, could you give him a governor's pardon, a gubernatorial pardon, because he did cooperate. And so ultimately what happened is the mob sent a message to Dewey through Polikoff: we will back you when you run for governor of the state of New York. All right? We will back you. Despite the fact that you took on us, we're still strong enough and you need our support. And sure enough, the mob threw its support behind Dewey. Dewey eventually gave him a gubernatorial pardon with the condition that he had to be exiled from the United States. He went back to Sicily. The two kids that were his bodyguards, I eventually met those kids in 1966 in a place called Fort Lee, New Jersey, in a little Italian restaurant. I met them together with Tommy Ryan Eberly, and these two kids were the bodyguards to Lucky Luciano when he was exiled back to Sicily. I did business with those kids, good boys. The third one, he wasn't so good. They found the car, but they never found the body. That was supposed to be funny, people. Anyways, eventually, I brought you to the point now of the struggle for the War of Independence in Palestine. Truman recognized the state of Israel. 20 minutes after they declared themselves independent. And it was not an easy decision for him. He was under tremendous pressure from George C. Marshall, who was his Secretary of State, very famous general during World War II, who was his Secretary of State, and told him, no way, you're going to do this, I'm going to resign, and so forth and so forth. Truman, up to that point, he was a Midwest anti-Semite. It was nothing for him to call a guy a kike. In fact, his close friend was Eddie Jacobson, that was his partner in the haberdashery in Lincoln, Missouri, during the time, before the time of the Depression. And the Zionists used him to finally reach Truman so that Truman would accept to receive Chaim Weizmann. And Truman apparently was impressed enough with Weizmann to say, yes, I'll do it. However, there was a Neutrality Act that was invoked it passed in 1939, that was invoked in 1947-48, which made it a criminal activity to ship weapons, cash, any support to Palestine for either Jews or to the Arabs. So Ben-Gurion sent a fellow by the name of Zaslani, his trusted confidant. He sends him here to the United States and says, go to the legitimate organizations, get support, and the legitimate organizations say, no. We're not going to break or violate American law. We're American citizens, blah, blah, blah. Ben-Gurion comes himself. Now, Ben-Gurion was in the Jewish army, in the Jewish unit of the Mule Corps, 1917, in the war of the World War I, and he had a friend. His fellow soldier was a fellow by the name of Resnick, Zalman Resnick. I think it's... Anyways. Resnick owned the Palisades Amusement Park in Asbury Park, New Jersey. And Ben-Gurion reached him and said, "No, what are we going to do?" He said, "I need weapons. Your government got this, no problem." Resnick was a real stand-up guy, and he supplied thousands of pistols, independent. There was an introduction made to a fellow by the name of Rudolf Sonnenborn. I don't know how many of you people know the name, but I recommend a book called The Pledge. It was written by a fellow by the name of Slater, 1970, as a tribute to these Jews from all over the United States of America that participated in supplying weapons, cash, and shipping to Palestine to help the cause. The Sonnenborn group would meet once a week. They would meet in the city. Industrialists from all over the United States would come, wealthy industrialists. Now you had a lot of surplus weaponry, trucks, jeeps, ammunition, dynamite, and so forth that was being bought up all over by the Zionists, all right? And it was being shipped from different places from Los Angeles. Greenspan, who was connected with the mob in Las Vegas. And then you had shipment out of Mexico. We had shipment out of Nicaragua. We had Anastasio Somoza, who was the dictator of Nicaragua, getting paid 3.5% kickback on all the weapons. The shipping was done under the flag of Panama. We had a Jew by the name of High Larner. Nobody knows this story, but it's a nice story, I'll tell it. High Red Larner was from Chicago. He represented Al Capone's organization in there was only one crew. Chicago was always one outfit, and that was Al Capone. We had 5 outfits here. We had an outfit in Jersey. I'm talking now about the Italians. And the Jews, once we were no longer of that generation, we identified with the Italians. But coming back to the story, as far as Anastasia in Panama, there were shipments made to Palestine under the flag of Panama, thanks to guys like High Larner. High Larner, by the way, was intimate, close with Noriega until Bush decided he wanted to get rid of Noriega. But he controlled all of the casinos, all the hotels, all the gambling, and he was very close to Meyer Lansky. And again, I'm reminding you from the very beginning when I told you, turn over a coin. You got one side of the coin, you got a patriot. The other side, you got a gangster. You flip it up, it's, who's who. Now, getting to the question of Irgun. Irgun reached out for mobsters. I used to eat once a week with an old-timer by the name of Sammy Cash. His actual name was Sammy Cass. Did a long, long stretch. He told me, he says, Myron, he says, we used to load up those ships out of Hoboken, out of Bayonne and Newark. He says it was a miracle that those ships ever made it to Coney Island, much less make it to Palestine. So what happened is, again, all the industrialists, the Sonnenborn Group, everybody, if you were shipping out of New York, you had to go to Meyer Lansky, you had to go to Longies Willman and say to them, fellas, we need shipping on false manifests coming out of New York, out of the Port of New York, Port of New Jersey. Ammunition's going to be declared as fertilizer, dynamite's going to be fertilizer, this one's going to, our guns or weapons and so forth are going to be sewing machines. So it's going to be all illegal, but we need your help. So there again, Lansky and Zwillman, the patriotism, contacted Anastasia, Albert Anastasia, and contacted Frank Costello, who controlled the ports, together again with Sox Lanza and together with Eddie McGrath, the Irish boss. And they got the full cooperation to ship and going to Palestine to help Irgun. Now, there was a movement in California, name recognition. Anybody recognize the name Mickey Cohn? Okay, so Mickey Cohn, together with Benny Siegel, we never call him Bugsy, people, all right? A little respect, call him Benny. Consequences weren't nice when guys would call him Bugsy. But they controlled the mob in California and LA over the Italians. And so what happened is that the Irgun contacted, and of course Irgun, Mickey Cohn, he liked that. Mickey Cohn was a patriotic Jew, and he liked tough Jews. And he said, well, what do you need? Well, we need money. We got a ship in the port of Marseille called the Altalena. How many of us here recognize the name Altalena? I do. Of course you do. You've recognized everybody today. Now, the Altalena was the name, the nom de plume, for Vladimir Jabotinsky. When he would write in the name of Altalena, which he was a lover of Italian literature, music, culture, and women. Now, Jabotinsky was a young student. He spent his time in Italy. He had no intentions ever to be the leader of a Zionist movement. Jabotinsky, the name, the Altalena, meant a swing. So that boat was sitting in Marseille. It was an Irgun boat, and it was ready to be shipped to Palestine at the time. Now, Mickey Cohn ran a tremendous dinner at a comedy club, and they raised $120,000, 1948, all right? And they loaded up the Altalena, and it was an Irgun ship, and it went to Palestine, reached shores of Tel Aviv, Vitkin Beach. And then a major controversy breaks out between Ben-Gurion and Begin. Now, Ben-Gurion, as we know, was the leader of Haganah. He was socialist, leftist. Nothing I can say at this particular moment. In a political sense, the man was the leader, and he created the helped to create the independence of the state of Israel. Begin, of course, was definitely my hero. I'm a follower of two. Picture of the Rebbe and the Jabotinsky. Irgun got into a controversy between Begin and Ben-Gurion. Ben-Gurion had a deep hatred for Begin. Ideologically, they were two worlds apart. So a misunderstanding, a breakdown in communication. Unfortunately, Begin wanted to hold back certain arms to protect Jerusalem. Ben-Gurion had Yitzhak Rabin fire on the Altalena. We lost 19 Jewish boys. And that night, it was a tragedy, and we were that close to civil war. And so finally, Begin got on secret radio, and he sent a message to every member of Irgun that we will not seek revenge. Jews do not kill Jews. Menachem Begin actually, in fact, with that, saved the state of Israel. It became one, as we know, Lev Echad, Army Echad. We joined forces, and even Lehi joined forces with Irgun, and so forth and so forth. People, I've told you my story that I wanted to share with you this morning. Now we're going to have a time period of questions and answers, and if I don't know the answers, I make them up. So people, don't be bashful. Ask. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I'm told to repeat the question that you're actually stating a fact that the prosecutor, the assistant prosecutor in the case, he was the chief prosecutor, David Marcus. You're talking about the same Marcus that was killed, Mickey Marcus. Okay, that was killed in the struggle. Okay, so the statement this gentleman's made is very good. That it was David Marcus who was the chief prosecutor that prosecuted Luciano. Then ultimately, he was a West Point graduate, if I'm not mistaken.
Class of 1924.
Class of 1924. It's your first cousin? Huh? Your first cousin. So the gentleman's first cousin was Mickey Marcus, who was definitely a hero, went and helped form and shape and influence the Israeli military, the Israeli army. So let's have a round of applause for the gentleman. Next question. Murder Incorporated. The gentleman's asking who was Murder Incorporated. Murder Incorporated was Louis Lepke Buchalter, and another gentleman by the name of Jacob Gora Shapiro, and the Italian was Anastasia. And he was known as the chief executioner of Murder Incorporated. Now, Murder Incorporated was a contracting organization. If you had somebody that you needed killed, you contacted them, and they would, for a price, they would go and execute the person. And that, by the way, is the Murder Incorporated organization is the one that killed Dutch Schultz 1935 in the chop house in Newark, New Jersey. And the reason they killed him, because Dutch Schultz went off the deep end, and because he wanted revenge against Dewey, and as I don't have to explain, but you don't go kill legitimate people. You don't kill a prosecutor. You want to bring the sky of wrath upon your head. You go kill a prosecutor. So what happened is that Dutch Schultz was hot potato. He came to Newark, New Jersey. He stayed at the Robert Treat Hotel, and that night he was in the chop house in Newark, New Jersey with two or three of his cohorts, and the fellow by the name of Bugs Workman, Charlie Bugs Workman, was a member of Murder Incorporated. He came in with another shooter. They killed all of them. Dutch Schultz survived. He was in the bathroom at the time, and they interrupted him while he was relieving himself. He survived for 2 or 3 days, and then eventually he died. But it was the mob themselves, and particularly it was instructions that were given by Newark, New Jersey, Long East Woman and Doc Stature, to get rid of Dutch Schultz because he was in Newark, New Jersey, and he was trouble for their organization in Newark because he was a hot potato in New York. He was coming to Newark. They didn't need him in Newark, New Jersey. So that's Murder Incorporated. Any other questions? Yes, sir. So Jetty's question is a good question. Did there have to come an authorization from the top in order to go ahead and execute somebody? Yeah. Somebody comes and says, gee, I want to hire you. No. It didn't work exactly that way. There was a hierarchy. You had to go all the way up. Just like today, the commission, you can't just go kill somebody without getting an okay from the commission. You know that, Jetty. Why are you telling me, you don't know that? Any more questions, people? Yes, ma'am. Yes, dear. Is there a Jewish underground? Yeah. Go to the 42nd Street subway and go underground. That's about the most underground you got today, sweetheart. Huh?
Why can't we get rid of the KKK?
Why can't we get rid of the KKK? Look, sweetheart. It's a good question. Nice lady's asking, why can't we get rid of the KKK? The generation that I was talking about, all right, they came from the ghettos, from the neighborhoods, from the playgrounds. These kids were fighters. These were boxers. These were kids that had to prove themselves physically. If you take a look at these kids today, all right, all they are, they're on an iPhone sending messages. They don't do anything physical, and it's a shame. It's a shame. It's an absolute shame, with the exception of the Israeli Defense Forces. God bless the IDF. We have a Jewish military. And the Mossad. Sweetheart, would you do me a favor? I want to take a sit down for a few minutes. Would you get up here and speak? You're doing terrific. Your question is, are there any contemporary fighters or mobsters? You're looking at him. And at my age, sweetheart, all I can do is stand up here for about an hour and tell you a story. Another question, people? Reform movement gangsters? Where are you coming from? No, there's no such thing as a gangster. It just doesn't. We're Orthodox. We're the gangsters. Yes, sir.
Have you ever met Mario Puzo, and how much of that story
Did I ever meet who? Mario Puzo, I never met him. And he never met me either, so we're even. Huh? About the horse's head, yeah. It was beautiful Hollywood, but it was a great movie. Godfather, no. Godfather, the underlying message of the story of the Godfather, right? Authentic, very, very good. My father's partner, after Doc Statcher left New Jersey in 1946, he went out to California, opened up the Moulin Rouge, a big nightclub out there, and then he was involved in the Sands Hotel and so forth with Meyer Lansky. By the way, I did meet Meyer Lansky, spent the Shabbos with him in Tel Aviv. Good guy.
What did you do?
What's that?
What did you do on that Shabbos?
What did he do? Yeah.
What did you do together with Meyer Lansky?
I'll tell you the story in just a second. So when Doc Statcher went out, my father's new partner that bought his share was Gerard Katina. My father, Allah Shalom, used to say about this man, that man could have run the Pentagon and could have run General Motors. He was that astute, that sharp. And so when you look at the Godfather movie, you see the same type of man. The bad business, we're not in the bad business, meaning no drugs, no prostitution, no human suffering. Other businesses they're involved in, but not that. Now, as far as Meyer Lansky is concerned, okay, I got instructions for Doc Statcher, I told you before, had been exiled by Kennedy and was sent off to, he agreed to go to Israel. And he was a tremendous chalutz, pioneer, all right? He didn't go to a kibbutz and pick oranges. He had the presidential suite at the Hotel Pal in Tel Aviv. And so he was there, and one day he comes to me and he says to me, by the way, you're going to be here for lunch on Shabbos. I said, what, do you get a sudden renaissance of religious beliefs? He says, don't be a wise guy. Just you be here. There was a chair. I sit at the table, a lot of people at the table, and the chair next to mine was empty. I says, who's going to sit here? Sure enough, in walks Meyer Lansky. Now, Meyer Lansky came that day not just to have lunch. So at the end of this long lunch, and by the way, several things he told me. He says, Myron, he says, when you see your name in the newspaper, run. Number two, he says, they made me bigger than Al Capone. And number three, he said, are you listening to these people at the tables next to us singing Shabbos Smirs? He says, I miss that so much. I had it when I was a kid, and I miss it. Rabbi, come up and talk into the mic. I don't want to repeat all this. You might use curse words.
In the history of the synagogue, we never had so many wonderful words being said at one time. But the question, I was very impressed with Myron. We called for a minyan at 9:30 this morning, and you showed up with your talis and your tefillin and your daven. So how is it a mobster shows up with his talis and tefillin? I mean, how did you get from such a world to a more observing world?
Okay. So, all right, it's a very interesting story, people. When my son was born, Benny was born, he's today 47. So I said, it's not enough, my pride, my ethnicity, it's not going to carry us forward. I married a Jewish girl from Buenos Aires, from the Polish community there. She spoke Yiddish, she cooked Yiddish, Jewish everything, literature, Jewish this, Yiddish that. But came to shul, an echt getug. So I says to her, you know what? You're proud of being a Jew. Oh, I'm proud. I'm proud too. For us to remain proud, I'm going to send Benny to the yeshiva. Nice woman, she said. does my shirts beautiful and cooks magnificent. She says, over my dead body. And I said, oh my God, I got to get rid of another dead body? So I says to my wife, Jesus, honey, I'm going to miss you. I take Benny to yeshiva and enroll him. There was a great rabbi from Newark, New Jersey, Rabbi Zev Siegel. He says to me, now, Mr. Sugerman, very nice. You're putting your son in the yeshiva. What happens, we know who you are. We knew your father. We knew. In fact, in Newark, on Yom Kippur, when Yom Kippur used to conflict with World Series playoffs. So what would the mobsters do? They'd go to Rabbi Irving Turner. Irving Turner was a great rabbi. And they'd see Rabbi Turner or see Rabbi Siegel and make a deal with him. So on Yom Kippur, 4 limousines would pull up in front of the shul, and they'd walk in, all gangsters walk in. The rabbi would say to the congregation, everybody just sit and be nice and quiet. I'll be back in 15 minutes. Take everybody downstairs, run a Yiska service, and the next day you get a bag, $5,000. So Rabbi knew who I was, where I'm coming from, and so forth and so forth. Of course, I didn't have a glorious career like I did eventually, but he knew where I was headed for. So, and the Rebbe knew where I was headed for. So anyways, Benny, he told me, well, what happens when the kid comes home? He wants to eat kosher. What happens when he wants to go to shul on Shabbat? Oh, my God. Go home and tell my wife again, sweetheart, you're going to make a kosher kitchen over my dead body. So today, she puts the knives and the forks in the dirt when I use the wrong... and that Benny today is a rabbi in Boca Raton with 8 kids, all right, and teaches Daf Yomi. So it only proves that God has a fantastic sense of humor. So the question is, what should be our reaction today, the legal way, as far as anti-Semitism is concerned? I'd start with something that goes even more basic than everything. Okay, Rebitz and Bluma. Let me answer your question by telling you this. I'm standing here today of a world. I told you a story about the Jewish underworld and so forth, and this is going to probably address something you're talking about. In order for us to fight anti-Semitism, we ourselves have to be proud of being Jews, okay? We need to be proud 101%, no compromise. Now, you could either, okay, so you could either be a Jew, a religious Jew, Orthodox, knows Chumash, knows Torah, participates in the mitzvah, does all these good things and so forth. You could be a secular Jew, but you could be a Zionist Jew. But it's Jew, that's pride, all right? So a soldier, if he's fighting, putting his life on the line, and he's eating something treif, he's still fighting. That's blood that he's putting on the line for the Jewish people. We need to have Jewish pride. Once we have Jewish pride, the Goyim get scared. The only reason that the Telanim, they gave us the respect that we got is because we were proud of ourselves. Our boys, our guys, were proud Jews. Nobody paid the Minutemen to go beat up Nazis. They did it because it was a patriotic act, that you had anti-Semites that were coming into our neighborhoods and beating up on Jews. You didn't go to the government because the government doesn't do a damn thing for you anyways. You got to go through the whole legal process. But if you're proud, you have completely different body language. You have a different approach. You have a different persona, as opposed to somebody's, I always ask the very famous question. Jews tell me, oh, I'm Jewish. Okay, very good, you're Jewish. So I say to them, good, tell me, what's the name of the mother and father of Jesus Christ? Oh, that's easy, Joseph and Mary. That's very good. 50% there. What's the name of the mother and father of Moses? Who? Come on, we don't know our own history, our own religion, our own heritage. And this is the most important thing. So if we have this, everything else sort of takes care of itself by itself. Rabbits and Bluma, did I answer your question? Thank you, sweetheart. Yeah, Rabbi David. Make sure it's a religious question, will you? because you look like a religious guy. Oh, you want to know about the relationship that I had with the Rebbe. So it was a very nice story, all right? So I used to, every time I would get I'd get locked up for running gambling. My Rabbi Moshe Kazanetz from Livingston, New Jersey, would run to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would say, check his mezuzahs, check his this, check his tefillin, check this. And I got a hell of a run going. I'm beating every case. Now, I went to see the Rebbe one time. I used to go see him, but never for the dollar bill. But this time I decided, family goes to see the Rebbe, all right? Now, remarkable. We go to see the Rebbe, we're introduced. This is the Sugermans from New Jersey, Rabbi Kazanetz. The Rebbe immediately starts to talk Yiddish with my wife. Now, she was not wearing a sign that says, my mama lotion is Yiddish. All right, my mother tongue is Yiddish. All right, the Rebbe immediately is talking Yiddish to her. To me, he looks at me, and he looks, and he looks, and he shakes, he goes like that, bows his head. Gives me $1. And then he says, again, gives me another $1. Says not a word. For 30 years, I'm saying to myself all the time, I got pictures of the Rebbe in every room in my apartment. I would not walk around without a Rebbe's picture in my car or in my pocket. It's a wonderful thing to have the Rebbe. And so, after 30 years, I finally come to the realization, he understood what I understand now, that my job is, at this stage of my life, to tell you the people the story of Jewish patriotism, pride, and heroism. All right? So with that, people, I have a book, and if you'd like to have a book signing, we'll be over at that table. Jetty, get over the table. Break out the books, all right? Grab the money, all right? Don't take any checks.
That's a big round of applause for Myron again. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming today. Instead of hanging out in the Hamptons, you came to learn about murder in Mineola. But thank you very much.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.